plans for the future, and that was primarily going to be something which I think the Heritage Associates would help us with, because they have been here since much of our journey, and are our main, I guess, beneficiaries of the Fortunate Emmett Till grant that we received so many years ago too. So that's really all I was looking at for this meeting, because I don't feel especially that there's any forthcoming research that we need to do. I know I'm already sort of started, Amy, even though I was giving a preamble as if I hadn't started, but it seems like I am already starting, which I'm glad that we have this many people here. So Brett, you're here, right? I see you're the TEP fan.
I saw him on the camera. Yeah, that was Brett.
Okay, great. Because I know he's on a cruise apparently, so I don't want to keep him too long where he might get dizzy or something like that. Go overboard. We would hate for that to happen. So specifically, all I wanted us to do today is, to whatever degree that it seems beneficial, is to review or reflect, that's a better word, on how the research process has been undertaken and how it's gone for the reality of about 5 years since it started in really the fall, I think the fall and or summer, or the beginning of that session. So I guess it was the summer of 2019, even though we did have some very slim years, especially as the 2023 of actually producing any hearings. There was still some research that we were doing. And now, since there's no more county hearings, then it's really a matter of the open-ended, whatever else we might find in the course of doing research. Now, whether that's the course of doing research in a specific targeted fashion, which again would really be by Heritage Associates in my view, or it's the happenstance of research that happens for anyone who is still doing research, either specifically for their county, or they have previously been engaged by us and they want to share their information with us, which of course is what we want to have happen, which is what our website is geared to have happen, both in person and of course electronically, which is what has been the case for virtually all of what we've done. So I know for our report writers, this would be could be really beneficial for you if perhaps we had more people who were sharing what their part of the journey has been. Now, at this point, there's really only myself, and there's David Armenti, and Nicholas is on. That's great. Hi, Nick. And certainly Brett, who have been in a part of the research. And Amy certainly has been a part of it when being made privy to, hey, there's an archaic word, privy to the research about descendants that we have received along the way. So to be specific to the agenda, I think my first item was, let me see if I can pull it up again. I had it here. I, of course, always have multiple windows open. Now I'm clicking on every single window to get to the one. To get to the one that I really want. Is it a PDF? No. Well, I guess I'll go. Okay, so, and again, it's reflections on research work completed. So what I have is what methods work best, what might have been improved, and that's item number 1. So is there anyone who wants to start? Since this is being recorded, there's no need for anyone to feel like if I say this, I won't have a chance for to reflect on it in the future, and people can add on to this in the future too. So for those of us who have been here since back in the day, and certainly for the benefit of our report writers, does anyone want to begin sharing what methods they feel work best? And certainly, Brett, if you want to, from your perspective too, as being a hired gun, so to speak, what you felt was really beneficial about the process, with the help that you received from us, with the, or to be very frank, the interference that you received from us, or the interference that you might have received from people on the outside, since it was very, I'd say, challenging at times with so many different entities wanting
Well,
to share information and then not knowing, at least easily, which is the most
hello,
certifiable
everyone.
information.
Can you hear me?
Yes, fine.
I think we've mentioned this before, and this is only with the benefit of hindsight. We felt that a more kinder, gentler approach to soliciting descendants and relatives may have worked better. As I indicated, I think a couple of meetings ago, just the terms testify, hearing, can be off-putting to a lot of people. And one of the things Don and I discussed was maybe from the start, if we had used or taken an approach that said, could we interview you? Would you meet with a commissioner and have some questions answered, and just do it in a less formal sounding way? I think may have made a difference. I think there's also, and it's sad for me to say this, but in many Black communities, the past, because it can be so ugly, is not as treasured as you would like for it to be. And the level of being uninformed about these atrocities that happen in their families and in their communities was a bit surprising to us initially. But when we thought about it and considered our own family and some other aspects, it's not too surprising. So I would say we enjoyed being part of the team. Our frustration was that we couldn't get more people to participate, and the ones that we could get, I don't think anyone we contacted knew of the lynchings until we informed them. I think there may have been one person that Donna met on the ancestry.com, but those are my comments.
Thank you, Brett. That's really very, very good to say, good to hear, but very substantive thoughts. Do you think it would have been, I guess, do you think if we had employed the gentler terms, and not just via a phone call or an email, but if we had included those gentler terms upon contacting someone in person, whether by phone or whether by email, and or in a newspaper ad or a newspaper solicitation, do you feel that we might have received more participation, or do you think it really wouldn't have mattered?
Again, with the benefit of hindsight, the answer is yes. I believe a more gentler approach would have worked. The other thing, and we talked about this, Chris, when we first came on board, the visibility of the commission, who they are, what their purpose was relatively low for such an undertaking. And if I had been in charge, I would have, I think, early on invested a little more in a general education campaign. where, and I know there were some budget issues, you know, and I understand that, but I would have focused a little more on making sure that the general public, not just academicians, not just historians, but that the general public had a sense of the commission. And I'm going to be quiet now. That's enough negative for right now.
No, that was excellent because, of course, there was no money at the beginning, but
Yeah.
the money's what brought you on. So, that's the really good part about it. So, but that's very, very interesting because some of the things that we're going to say that any of you are going to share right now, I would offer is what we look at going forward, which is to say the kinder, gentler approach of terminology, even though that will not contribute to any, at this point, forthcoming mandated county hearings. It can certainly be something we put on our website, or for those of us who are, for the lovely ladies, the mother and daughter team who are doing our report, that something in there could say that the Maryland Lynching Truth Reconciliation Commission, upon its cessation, is still looking for contributions from anyone who may have this. And we can certainly include the same terminology we used before, which is that you do not have to share your name. You don't have to give all your information so that people can track you down. But certainly we are still looking for anyone who can share information so that others can be acknowledged and to whatever degree commemorated, such as we have done over the last 5 years. So that what you have just said is very helpful for sure. Anyone else?
David and Amy have their hands up.
Oh, I didn't even. Well, there you go. Okay, sure. Go ahead,
Yeah,
David.
I'll hop in and you know, Chris, you mentioned kind of the long history of this, and you know, if we're thinking about this as a 5-year process, not just the last couple of years when the hearings have been more of an intense schedule, but one piece I think is important is that idea that there were so many different organizations, individuals, entities that did research either before the commission, during, you know, simultaneously to our work, which I think in some cases was a strength, and in some cases was a challenge or a combination thereof. And I know that especially early on, you know, it was an incredible benefit to look to whether it was David Terry's work in MSA early on, Nick's work with Bowie, some of the individual counties and regions, some of whom we ended up enlisting to collaborate for the actual hearings. So the ability to leverage and credit work that had already been done was good in general, but it also, you know, made it challenging in terms of who were going to be those authoritative voices, you know, how much recreating the wheel was necessary for a commission that was already kind of strapped for capacity. You know, we didn't want to embark on something like we were coming from scratch, because in most cases we were not. So I guess all that is to say, it was kind of a mixed bag of opportunity and challenge that so many different individuals and organizations wanted to be a part of this truth telling. And, you know, thinking about how to incorporate all of those voices, both in public settings, on the website, in private conversation even, you know, there were instances where tensions arose around credit, attribution, how things were going to be, you know, put out there for public accessibility. So, you know, there was just, it became a little unwieldy in that sense. And, it's hard to say that, the commission would have any sort of ownership over that. A lot of what other people were producing, but we wanted to use it. We didn't want to start from scratch. So, thinking about that kind of dynamic, I think is something that should be ultimately reflected in a final report. And, in the way we continue to talk about this work is that, collaboration is hard. But it should have made things easier for us. And in certain instances, I think it did, especially when we were able to engage in kind of a true collaboration with other researchers, rather than either a perceived or actuality kind of pulling from what other people had already done, and some of the, maybe misunderstandings or challenges that came with that part of the process.
Thank you, David. I sort of want to follow up on that, but at the same time, I don't want to not get to to Amy and not get to Janice. Amy, is your point totally different, or is it along the same lines? Or?
It actually threads from Brett through to David.
Okay,
Do you want me to go, or do you want to?
Well, because I don't want. Well, okay, this is what I'll say to David, and anybody can contribute to this too, as well. However, it's probably more of a general comment, which could probably wait. So I'll put it out there, which is to say, I feel you, David. I feel you. I wonder if, again, upon reflection, do you think there was another way to have handled it so that we could have avoided some of those aspects? Because it did seem at some point like, and I know we talked about this ourselves, like a maelstrom of information that was coming in. And it was hard to figure out, just as you said, what do we already have? What do we not already have? Not having the resources to have someone sit down and say, okay, these newspapers we already have. These articles we already have. This we already have. It was just like, let's grab it all. Let's grab it all. And we're keeping it all. And you're saving it here. You're saving it here. You're saving it there. You're saving it there. You have access to this. You have access to this. You have access. Do we have? So it's just so I guess that's my question. Do you think there was a way that we could have funneled it in better, or maybe not, or maybe this is the best we could do with what we had?
Yeah, and I'll try to keep it brief, to let other folks get in, but I do think that we could have had an improved process. I hate for it to sound like it's pointing fingers at any one particular thing or circumstance, but obviously the pandemic did not help our ability to come together and weed through this, what things are kind of complex. So, we did put out public calls. We did, make efforts to collaborate with researchers, again, with varied levels of success. But I think our ability to come together and really weed through that in an earlier stage would have positioned us to be better organized and really prioritize in the last, more like the last 3 or 4 years when it really mattered, in kind of representing it in hearings and such. So yeah, hindsight is 2020, et cetera, but definitely, kind of setting the stage early on and not having to deal with those kind of communication and convening challenges that we had, especially in 2020, I think we could have gotten on a better footing.
Okay, thank you. I think Amy, I think you were first before you. Okay.
So I think that Brett said something that's important, and then actually David's comments echo it. So Brett talked about, potentially having increased visibility of the commission as a whole at large and its purpose would probably have yielded in a different starting place for building those collaborations with individuals, with the county coalitions lowercase c, any kind of group, be it the formal, Lynching Memorial Project, county coalitions, or just whomever's. I think that starting place would have been different. So that's the hindsight is 2020. I like really, really like Brett's comment that the interview, having an interview with a descendant of a victim, perpetrator, community member, I think would have been really helpful. And the ones that I was part of and the ones that I have listened to, those interviews are really rich. Some of those folks are now deceased. I wish I could ask them a few follow-up questions. And even this past weekend's hearing, there's some follow-up questions just where the tape got, spliced. So I think the interview would have been really good. I was really sad to see that disappear partway through the process. So I think, though, thinking about maybe the next 2 months, we have a hearing in April. And one of the suggestions that's come out of the logistics committee is sending a note, largely defined, to anybody we've had contact with. They've registered to watch in person or live stream. They may have testified. We may have contacted them to invite them to provide testimony, but they've opted not to. So really anybody, cast the net wide. And I think, again, reflecting on Brett's comments about the choice of language we use, really think thoughtfully about how we word that form of communication and invite them to send a note into MLTRC at maryland.gov to, watch the live stream or come in person, to reach out and call somebody and share their thoughts orally. Again, I'm generating a lot of extra information. And transcriptions are hard. So I'm cognizant of that, but I think as a way to build stronger relationships with our community members, with the history, with descendants, one more attempt at just inviting people to share. That would be in advance of the hearing, but also provide that opportunity at the April hearing itself. So I think I guess I'll be quiet in a second. I think the suggestions Brett made, coupled with what David has said, I think we have a way to sort of course correct in the last 2 months, just a little bit, that could yield really fruitful information.
Thank you, Amy. That's very good. I do feel that that's one of what we have to, not what we have to, but what we could do or have a mind to do at this point is what can we do within, however we approach April 4th and 5th, and however our report writers reflect what we've done too, is how is that reflection, how is that reporting, when disseminated to whoever our readers are, certainly I could say, especially in the time that we find ourselves in, will make them feel more likely to share if they haven't already done so. Janice?
So my comment will sound, or my question will sound perhaps tedious and administrative, but it actually might be a response to the question you just posed, which has there been any thought to doing like an annotated bibliography, or like listing all the people? I know we will do references. That's kind of an obvious thing to say or do, especially for academic kinds of stuff, but sort of making public, these are the people who contributed to our research, and here's a sentence or two about either the book they wrote, the article they wrote, the video they sent, the testimony they offered, whatever, as kind of an annotated bibliography. Is that a thing? Because you talked about how things are so scattered. If there's a way to bring that all together as a way of acknowledging and memorializing the people who contributed actual research, is that a thing?
I mean, it's a thing. I don't know. I don't think it's been done yet, but I think it's a very valid idea. And I feel like we have, sounds trite, we have the means to do that because we have over the several years, we have emails, we have threads, we have documents, which at each particular hearing, we acknowledge those persons who helped us. Many times they were the persons who gave the histories themselves, or they were they provided the expert testimony. So I think that's an idea, and I'm one that I would like to think that one of us would come up with this at some point anyway, before we call it a day, where we'd have a credit page, a resource page for not only for bibliography, which I think we already have in the works to some degree, certainly a listing for the newspapers, but of those individuals who literally share their time. Because for one thing, we've been sending so many, Hannah's been sending us so many thank you letters and thank you cards to people who actually attended the hearings. So in the voluminous amount of emails that we have in the MLTRC website, there would be listings of individuals. So that certainly would be, I think, one of the main things that that would benefit us, and we'd be so remiss not to do.
And so just to add on to that, because I'm trying to figure out, is this part of the report writing, or is there someone else who is available to do that work?
I mean, I would suggest that would be another appendix to put at the end, of the people who have been, and that I would think would be a collaboration between folks on the research committee and you and Leah, just to make sure that they get you accurate information so that we can, as thoroughly as possible, recognize people who have contributed in any meaningful way to the research that we all have gathered.
So thank you for that, because that was really what my question was. But and that makes perfect sense, and it's fine. So a question then on the front end is, how soon can we start populating that list? Because I mean, we're going along and we're doing what we're doing, but some of the information is already available, and we can start to templatize or put it in a file somewhere that we can fold into the work. So I just saw a comment from somebody, but I didn't read it.
Amy had a comment. Go ahead, Amy.
I was just saying that at least for 24 and 25 hearings, I have lists of people who may have testified or participated, contributed. I like the word contributed as we're thinking about words. I may not have all the names of the researchers. That was not my area necessarily, but I have, others.
Okay.
Not othering, just others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The sooner we get that, the sooner we can start to plug it in.
Okay, good. I think that, do we have, or have you guys planned to, I guess the way that you're organizing it, which is to say, my initial thought is that we would go in the order of the hearings, which is to say the first hearing, I think our first hearing was Allegheny County, I think. And so we could put all of our heads together and try to make sure that, look at all the different communications we had that regarded Allegheny County. What are the names of the persons who contributed to that? Who are the speakers we had? Who are the public officials we had? Who gave the history? And so try to focus in that way so that we feel relatively confident. Okay, we have now listed all the people who contributed to the Allegheny County hearing. And then that is sent to and confirmed with you at 3PV. And then we go to the next one, which I might have been
Baltimore County, and I certainly have that list.
Okay. And so in my view, that would be a good way of trying to systematically go this one done, this one done, this one done, this one done. And then when it's all done, I guess is that 14, right? Isn't it crazy? Isn't it 14 we ultimately have done? Is that right? Something like that. Then we go back over it again to see if there's anybody else we might have missed in the different categories, like who did the history, who provided the history, who read the history, who are the people who were the the descendants
Mhm.
and who were the people who were the witnesses or provided expert testimony, who were the public officials who actually spoke. And perhaps for each county, there is a breakdown of the contributors. Then we populate that with the names of the contributors, and so on and so on and so on. That's a way I think could be relatively, don't want to use that forward easy, but relatively
Organized.
organized so that we can feel relatively secure that we have found something, compartmentalize something to say that now that one is accounted for, and then we go to the next one.
And I think it will require somebody on your end to fact check, to make sure we haven't left anybody out, because we'll only go with the lists we receive and we'll organize them accordingly. But we can't leave anybody out, and we have to make sure. Yeah,
for sure.
And in theory, I agree with Chris's point that feels like a natural and an efficient way to try to compile that information. In theory, the Google Drive would have most of that information, but that's why it's in theory, because like we said, this information is dispersed amongst different people and organizing principles. But for lack of a better place, that's kind of the central. So you would, in some cases, you would find a research report, a hearing specific research report where individuals are listed for their contributions, again, before, during the process. And so that could be a starting point at the least. And like you said, definitely in need of a review process, kind of a vetting of that information, and the executive committee would probably be the best way, I in my opinion, because that would be a cross section of people that have been involved from the very beginning to varying extents, and then other folks like Amy, who have become more involved in the last couple of years, who can, we can all kind of fill in the blanks, hopefully, from there.
Do you want me to set up an Excel document, Google, whatever it's called? I'm sort of asking Chris and David and Nick as a initial framing to load, or do you want, or does somebody else want to initiate that? I mean, we're right here in this moment. We could assign it right this moment.
Right. We're taking it. What is that? The homeopathic or whatever. We're being very mindful now. We're not being very demure. We're being very mindful of what we're doing right now. I'm fine with that. This would be something that would definitely be shared with 3PV right from the beginning. I think so that you are able to see what we're putting in there and get a sense of how we're putting it in there, and then as we're populating it, you can let us know, is this helpful to you the way it's being done?
Right.
Because we definitely want to help facilitate your reporting and how you're capturing the information in a way that's helping you be proactive and productive as you move forward as well.
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you.
So that's a yes, Amy. Yay. There was something else that came to me while we were saying that. Who recalls, because I'm not sure, when we started recording? Did we start recording with the first hearing, or did we? Because Allegheny was only virtual anyway.
Right. They're all recorded.
Okay, good. Because I would venture for 3PV that on and I'm saying a superficial level, and I don't mean a superficial, I mean more like a surface view, that in every single hearing, there would have been verbal recognition of those individuals who contributed to that hearing. So at a first level, that would be, if it was my charge, that would be my first view of capturing the names of who who outside of the commissioners
Mhm.
were the people who helped contribute to the creation, to the production of said hearing.
Mhm.
And that would be my first pass.
Makes-
Then it goes back to, all right, now we're Allegheny County. Are there emails? Are there this? Are there that? Are these other things that lend themselves to confirmation of these names or introduce another name of somebody else who helped do that? Because we even have how many different project managers? I mean, primarily we had two project managers, Trish, and we had Stephanie before that. But then there was another person for, I don't know, a few weeks, something like that. We had one other person. So there's probably, we had other commissioners that have been a part of this from the beginning, which certainly should be acknowledged as well. So like that would be another aspect, that the way that I would think that could make it as exactly Gary Norman, among others. Stephanie, thank you so much. Tim Baker. I mean, there was was the one that the Washington Post. Deneen Brown. So there was, yes, exactly. Thank you, Nicholas. So that's part of what I feel could make it not as hard, or not that we're just pulling at straws. It's like
Mhm.
there's definitely some fundamental pieces of material that we have in place that I think we have to remind ourselves not to overthink it and forget about some things that are in plain sight that will let us know, boom, 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 this is who was here from the beginning and moving. Elgin Klug was the first, I think Elgin was our first research committee chair.
Mhm.
I think that. Then Maya, of course, was the logistics chair before Amy. Before Maya was Tim Baker. I mean, there's a thread. I mean, there's threads that go through so many of these. Charles Chavis was the first reconciliation
Chair. Yep.
right. I don't know if there were any meetings, but I think he was certainly in name. He was the chair of that as well.
Mhm. Great, thank you.
Certainly. Any other thoughts on this subject? And the second subject is pretty much not the same thing anyway. So I can get to what it says. Okay. Now the next point, because that's what methods work best, what might have been improved. Step 2 is reflections on research work to do. Next steps. Now I think the Chimp Band is still here. That's good. So that is one that I feel we should just ponder. And I think to some degree that's what we are talking about. How we couch this, how we reflect on what we're saying right now, how it could be better, how it could influence, promote, inspire, motivate individuals to reach back into their pasts or into their communities to find out more. What is that? What does that look like, Nick?
Yeah. As I was thinking about, well, what can we have folks on research committee do? What Janice and Leah are going to be working on the final report, and I think having you all available to look at drafts as they're writing up those case studies will be invaluable, because you all have done the work of amassing the research, and so you're going to be familiar with that. So I think having fresh sets of eyes on the texts as they're being spun up will be invaluable for the process. And I think it's going to be helpful, I think critical, to have your perspectives on these, particularly since those of us on reconciliation committee are going to be working, at least in the short term, to make sure that we get the hearing, the 2-day hearing staged, and then helping to make sure that we get all of that material available for Janice and Leo once they've finished this first part,
Mhm.
looking at the history of it, sort of the truth side, and then looking at reconciliation. So yeah, if you guys would be willing to stick around and to help, read through and comment on these parts of the final report, that would be invaluable.
Mhm, mhm. Just to that point, thank you so much for that, Nick. To that point, Leah has drafted a template for the case studies that I guess we need to share with the committee. But we're using that to help us organize the pieces of information that we're gathering. Before we get too deep in that, should we share the template with you just to make, and it picks up, I think, some work that somebody had already done about, name, location, blah, 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 but it goes a little bit deeper than that. And so should we share that sooner rather than later? Because we're using it to guide us.
Sure. Friday at the Reconciliation Committee meeting will be just fine. So
Okay.
if you want to send it out before that, that's fine.
Okay.
But, we can talk about that, because again, I've got the agenda done. And so, yeah, we're going to be talking about the hearing and then talking about the final report. So we'll make sure you have time to share that.
Okay.
David?
Just I think something that we should think about as a committee too, and this I think could and should involve Heritage Associates moving forward, is we've had hearings and we've had plenty of research, but that doesn't mean that we have full consensus on what the facts, so to speak, of these cases and circumstances were. And again, this speaks to various, whether it's descendants, other community members, the oral histories, the newspaper research. How do we negotiate the differences that we're seeing in the historical and the presented record that's come through in the hearings? So definitely not an easy thing to do, but I think that again we're the only body of people that are uniquely equipped to kind of look at that and give a sense of it. So even if that is acknowledging, on a particular case, it remains disputed that it took place at this exact location. Things along those lines where we are acknowledging that history is difficult, particularly when you are marrying archival research, memory, and present circumstances. So some effort to kind of bring that whole concept together and acknowledge what we still maybe aren't completely sure about.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for saying that, because we've already bumped into some of that. Some of the names are different, some of the ages are different, some of the time sequence, whatever. And so thank you for that. And it makes absolute sense that the research committee would be the ones to make the final decision and not us. So, yeah.
Charles, what we're doing is we went through just sort of reflections on how we feel the research process has gone, what we might have been able to, what might have worked out better, and now we're on reflections as to what was the first part was reflections. Now it's about what are next steps, where should the research go forward.
Okay, got you. So first part is Janice, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So feel free to send me whatever you want us to look at. I think for me to look at, I'd love to help out and assist. I'm also going to make sure that you have a copy, send you a copy of my book directly. One second, my son just walked in. Apologize. But so because I had this same issue in my book as well, and I've teased this out with a lot of these oral histories that come in and throw a wrench in things. But because we have so many we have the historical archival work, but we also have these contemporary oral history interviews. I think that would be helpful. So that's one piece. Second piece is, like I said, send me whatever you'd like for us to look at, and I can look at it in real and as soon as I can and get back with you. But I'd love to support in the writing process as much as I can. To make sure that because a lot of the foundational stuff, David, our mentee, and myself kind of laid out. So, yeah, please.
Okay.
Sure. Just send over. Yeah.
And I mentioned this to Chris last week. I guess we talked. Was it Friday? About the fact that we did create, and it was partly related to the stuff you sent us, Charles, too, but create a potential outline for the entire final report, and we were hoping to get some feedback from folks about that. I'm not sure if we sent it to the right parties, but
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say on that front, I mean, I did actually sort of go through that and had a couple of, comments on the table of comments, table of contents. The only major thing I would say is, plan on those sections being a little longer than the page, ranges that you were thinking of. Cause,
yeah.
In this case,
We
bigger.
figured that, but we wanted to start small.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you got a whole bunch of historians in the room, and I think one thing is letting the sources kind of lead you is like kind of how a good way to go about it, because you never know where, and I think that's one thing that, Chris, I'd like to get, we can consider as well. Certain cases are going to have an abundance of sources, whereas you're going to have this balancing, approach, and this approach that you all are going to have to take, because the Eastern Shore cases, specifically Armwood and Williams, there's a whole bunch of evidence. King, there's a whole bunch of evidence. So I would say about 5 to 8 of these cases have way more evidence, like 90% more than the others, right? And that's something that we kind of got to we can try to reconcile, but I think it's okay. It should be understood it's okay for some of these to be longer than others if we're going to properly tell the story. But yeah, to your point, yes. And what was the other piece about the database? What sources have we not consulted, right? And so right now, in terms of the research, one thing that I would have hoped and I would have wished, but of course with the time constraints, are the NAACP records. So one thing that is missing in terms of research priority is our access to our whether or not we've been able to go into those records. And we were given some stuff from CRRJ that they had given us in exchange for, I literally had to make like a document deal. Everything that I documented on Matthew Williams and Armwood, I shared with them, and they gave us their entire case file from 1930s to 1970s. But that does not include, it only includes the Armwood and other cases. And there are NAACP files that are earlier that we have not looked at. So that's a priority that I think should be addressed, and we can find a way to address that on our end and get that to you to see if there's anything that we missed. But that's the only thing that I wish, kind of regret or concern that I have regarding research. Those are my thoughts. And I'm sorry for coming in late, everyone.
Well, we're just glad you're here now, Charles. One of the things I was thinking, if this meeting had just been, let's say, myself and Emily and Heritage Associates, is that I was, as far as next steps, I was going to ask them to consider, almost as I mentioned to 3PV, going through every case study we have and looking at it and thinking, where is the question not answered? Which is to say, we've got this, we've got this, we've got this, we've got this. If we could do more, if there's a smoking gun, where is that gun? Where is the next direction you'd like to go, if possible? And such as what, Charles, you just mentioned, that at the different NAACP records. I mean, that's a different source. That now maybe that's not a source for all the 40 or so, but it's a different source. It's outside of the archives. It's more national, but it's a different source. And for each and every one of these, some of which we have so little, and probably, unfortunately, there will not be any more, but for those where there's more sources that we could explore, perhaps exhaustively, what are those sources? And to whatever degree that there's money to still help pay Heritage Associates, or if you're able to do that with the PAX Foundation or with any of our other entities who are able to do that, what are those other targeted sources that we could go to in a very specific goal-oriented manner to, as much as possible, again, I know I'm throwing in a lot of qualifiers, be able to say, well, we've looked at this to the nth degree. We don't have to look at this anymore for that piece of information. And then, and on and on and on and on and on we go until one can think 99% sure that we've gone through these 40 cases. And now it's on to a 41st case, a 42nd case, a 43rd case, a 44th case, something of that, so that we have a sense of, if other money comes to us that we could put forth, and okay, now these are the next steps we go to. We don't need to look for another newspaper again in our lives about this person, but we need to look at this. We don't need to look at another court record about this person, but we know that there was a church that was here at the same time, which had some meetings. We need to go to that church. Those are the type of things that I think if we could have that listed, it would be, for people, again, when we're writing this final report, and people think, well, what are they going to do now? Well, we could do more if we knew this. We could do more if we had this source. We could do more if we had access to this community, is something else that I think would lend us a hopeful, positive point of view for those people who are looking at us as being
Yes.
the first commission to do this.
And I think I'm glad. So almost like when you do a report, you have something like this. We wish we would have gotten to this, but we didn't. These are the next priorities right here. So like having a list, even towards the end where this is, and I think we have a lot of leads for cases that just need more investigation, specifically the potential massacres in Somerset County. But these are some that were identified in the FBI records that I've been made aware of, and the NAACP record. But we just don't have enough in time to kind of go off of alleged, investigate these extra cases. It's so I think that makes sense, Chris, for something for us to address. But I'd like to have, I think, that addressed in the report. But one thing that Professor Eiffel reminded me of and all of us of is you don't get a pass because you got away with it. You didn't because you didn't go through with it, right? So one thing I do in my book, and I think is important, we need to have a section for each one of other episodes, document, even if it's a list, it can be a list of near lynchings and other racial terror. It could have been a direct, it may not fit our definition, but we need to have a documentation or a list in each case study that kind of documents the climate of racial terror, not just the actual lynchings, because the lynchings actually are the result of something that is brewing oftentimes before, and that needs to be understood and documented. Terror just doesn't start with the lynching for Black communities. It starts way before that, right? And so I just want to make sure we can. And so what that looks like, you may have a riot that emerges. No one dies, but a Black community is targeted. There's a riot. No one was lynched, but that is important information to have that needs to be in there. So so those are just my thoughts. But I'm going to be supporting you all and assisting as much as I can, and I'm going to have some of my students as well.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. And I think that some time ago, I think Hannah, weren't you looking on a near lynching? We had that in the works.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, we decided not to include those quite so much,
Right.
as they were beyond the scope of the commission.
Right. And that's something that very much we can do within let's say I was going to say apocalyptic, which I don't mean that, but within a post-commission world, a post-Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission world, what are the other areas we would explore outside of the mandate of 1854 to 1933? Certainly, some of you were privy to the Jerry Uckerman email where he's talking about you didn't cover Nicholas Snowden. You should have covered Nicholas Snowden, and then was it Joe Vermillion from Prince George's County? You didn't cover Joe Vermillion because it was white on white crime, it was black on black crime, and it wasn't specifically what the legal mandate is. So within a report, one could say we acknowledge that we did not look into these specific examples of lynchings. However, we know it's very viable as being a part of this overall study of of mob violence. We know we did not focus on near lynchings, but we know that sometimes it's just because they didn't succeed doesn't mean it wasn't their attempt. People get sent to jail for attempted murder as well as they get sent to jail for murder. So I feel like those are also things that can be reflective in this report as well, to give 3PV even more stuff to do. but there's something else that I think would be viable that we could throw into this report and to consider as being after we fulfilled our mandate. What did you? I think you wrote something down, Charles. What is it? Okay.
I just put out loud, like, it could be something as simple as, during the course of our investigation, we document the following race riots, racially motivated homicide. To your point, I mean, it is, and as long it can be a chart, it can be, because I think that would be helpful. That would be a simplified way to go about it. That way, we're not going down a rabbit hole. But I definitely think that would be helpful. One thing that we didn't think about is the historical trauma piece. I know that Caitlin's on here, but what role? Because I think one of the things that makes this commission unique and different is our choice to include social workers throughout this process. And so I think that there should be something written that deals with the historical trauma piece, right? But those are just my thoughts in the conclusion of some portion. But go ahead, Caitlin.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to a few of you on Saturday about this, about really wanting to be able to provide something for the final report on, one, our observations and our experience throughout, but also thinking about when we're making recommendations, what considerations need to be made to care for people holistically, including psychological health, including, culturally attuned responses, community attuned responses in terms of the psychological piece. So yeah, we would really like to do that and work together to make sure that it's something that's going to be useful for all of you.
Right.
Okay. Well, it is almost an hour, and I know that we have had so many meetings. I mean, my God, Amy was like in every other meeting, and Nick was in every other meeting, and now we're sort of in every other meeting. So, and now we're leading to the final call with the 2-day event in April. So let me ask this: unless anybody else has anything more to say about this general topic today. Okay, then my next question is: do we feel we need additional meetings of the research committee as such? And I'm not saying this is it, bye, peace out, but I am saying, do we need to do monthly right now, since we don't have specific hearings to gear up to? It's not our focus, to my understanding. Research is not our focus for the April 4th and April 5th hearing. That's more reconciliation, it's more reflection, it's more, one can even think in terms of reparations, what would that look like? Because we have, I don't know if we have that many, but we certainly just recently, Emily was able to download and shared with us the list of those. I guess it was 6 comments or so we have of people who actually responded to the reparations question on our website. So it's not a specific ask that we have right now. And I know that earlier today, Donna actually responded to my email about this meeting, saying that she had a lead towards somebody else. I think it was a family member, if that's right, Brett, who believes that a member of their family had been lynched, but she's going to look into that more.
Right. That's correct. That's my understanding.
Okay. Now, is that within the years? Quite frankly, the 1859 to 1933. Do you know?
I really don't know, Chris.
Okay.
But I'll find out for you.
Okay, great, thanks. So along the lines of what we want to happen, sounds awful to say, what we want to happen is to find out if there are more incidents of racial terror lynchings that we were not already aware of, that through this work we now will become aware of, that other people can know to research that. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it might be beneficial. I'm not necessarily against the meeting, but I do think since we have this working group we should take the lead on the research, shift our focuses towards the research, supporting the writing and from a research perspective, right? So, and to clean and tidying up, begin to move towards the report piece and tidying up the loose ends around what's missing and what's not. If we shift our efforts towards that, I think that would make sense. That still didn't answer your question about the meeting, but I do think if we're not meeting, we can at least agree to, okay, let's have this workflow or process for how we're going to shift our focus on the research portion of the report.
Okay, then let me say this. Then, not that somebody's going to say, "No, you can't say that." But so 3PV. I'm of the mind to say that you will contact me or contact Charles or contact Amy or David if you want to still be one of the kind to say we'd like to meet to talk to go over this. We'd like to meet to go over this section or that section, and we will call and meet. We will check our schedule. Of course, it's not easy. We don't have something already set to see how many of us can get together and review with you whatever section of the report that you are on, so that we can look at that. Because I think I was going to write to you. I was going to write to you, Amy. I was going to go right to you. So I'll go right to you.
I actually was going to say, make sure you say included Nick on that list.
Oh yeah. And
Go
Nick as
to.
well.
I didn't know if you said his name or not.
I
but-
did not. You're right.
Yeah, Nick is the point for a reconciliation committee would.
Yes. Because
Okay, so-
that's yeah.
David, Amy, Charles, Nick, and Chris.
Yeah,
right?
but to be clear, I want to make sure that because I know that there were some efforts to kind of combine the two for the report, but it needs the research committee is going to be responsible for the research findings that they were supervised by which we supervise Heritage Associates. And so the buck stops in terms of research with this committee, right? And so I want us to make sure that we have a separate role that we understand as we go about supporting the writing of the report, right? So that's kind of what I was trying to say.
So are you saying separately from what I said, does this have 3PV contact us when they need help, or you're just saying that the research committee should definitely be incorporated within that?
Yeah, the research committee should be incorporated within
Okay,
that.
gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. And they should, in terms of the research and the methods and things like that around, methodology, a lot of those are like research based as far as I kind of think about it. So some of those questions should be coming directly to this committee.
Okay.
Right.
Do you have Charles on that list? Did you add Charles to that list, Denise?
I did. Yes, I have Chris, David, Amy, Charles, and Nick. Who am I forgetting?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's good. I mean, you could add David Fakunle on it just because he is the chair, but he doesn't have to. I mean, nobody has to every single time show up, but just so that he's aware.
Yeah.
No, I said David. Are there two Davids?
Yeah, there's David I mentioned who's here right now.
Got it.
And I had a question for Amy real quick. Amy, I know that the Reconciliation Commission is meeting as well, but do you have others? Who else is doing research? Because I understand that another group is helping with research. So,
No, there's only the only specific people are supposed to be Heritage Associates, and then we have all the different offshoots, which is the different county coalitions. And then I feel like and separate from that, we have people depending on the county, there would be somebody who might be working specifically in that county.
I thought there were like some law students or some students that.
Well, Michelle Garwick had some students who were looking over things and doing the transcriptions, from what I understand.
So that's the only thing. Okay, I don't know why I thought of something else.
Well, Michelle Coles had some interns as well, but I don't think they were really doing research there.
No, they're coming from the reconciliation
Right.
standpoint.
Yeah.
No,
So what are they doing, Amy? I'm sorry.
it's part of the reconciliation committee, so it's not a research driven thing.
No, I was just asking what they were doing.
Yeah, they help to identify potential folks to provide testimony at the April hearing. That's
Okay, that's good.
I'm just aware of the time. I don't want to take up more everybody's time.
Okay, so the only thing they're doing is just helping identify people who can help speak for the hearings. Okay.
But the best thing is just check in with Michelle and just see
Yeah, I'll check.
what she says to them.
Yeah.
At Michelle Coles, because there's Michelle Garbrick has her students too. With Michelle.
Right.
Okay, well, it's already 4:05. Wow,
Right,
thank you guys so much for being a part of it. It crossed my mind that we probably wouldn't have anybody. I mean, myself and Emily might be saying hi, and then but I'm just so happy and pleased that we all got together today to just go over all the amazing work that we've done and been able to produce, and celebrate the fact that we don't have to do another county hearing because. What was that famous thing that Barack Obama said? I know because I don't have to, because I won them both, or something like that. So I don't have to do anymore because we did them all. So it's great. So everyone, thank you so much for being with us again. And we will be in touch, I'm sure, because 3PV will make us be in touch.
Yeah, for sure. You can count on that.
All right.
Thank you all so much for this. This has been really useful. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. All right. Bye, everybody.
So long, everyone.
Bye.